Hello, and thank you for visiting our channel Horror Stories Before Sleep. Now it's time to listen to another creepy story. I got a job as a park ranger working in a fire tower. Now I wish I hadn't. 149 stairs. That's how many there are to get up to the fire tower I'm posted at. I used to think getting up there meant safety. Now I'm hoping it just means survival. Climbing 149 steps when you're healthy is no small feat. When one of your legs has been torn to shreds, you're bleeding from many places and you're trying to get up there to wrap it, hoping there's enough bandages so you don't bleed to death. It's a lot more difficult. Then there are the stairs themselves, which also count as a hazard when you have to hop up each one, causing pain to shoot through your injured leg. The stairs are skinny enough as they are, but the closer you get to the top, the smaller they get. How do I know the exact number of steps? I counted them. I also counted which ones I miscalculated my jump, or brushed my foot against the step, or did something else that nearly sent me sailing over the rickety railing to my untimely death. The first time was one step number 3, then 15, 37 was a bad one, 52, 107, 120, and finally 1. 43. I guess it's a good thing I'm deathly afraid of heights. By now, you may have figured out I'm a park ranger. How did I end up playing this deadly game of hopscotch? It started a week ago when I got the job. I was super excited because I love working alone, and I love nature. What other job blends those two so well? That excitement waned quite a bit when I arrived at the tower on my first day and looked up at those tiny metal steps I would have to climb to get to my job. The whole thing looked about as sturdy as if someone had built it with an erector set. I mean, honestly, seeing surface rust on stairs that have to support your weight is terrifying. And I had to wonder how much I would be swaying when the wind really kicked up. I wanted to close my eyes and just run up, but I didn't dare. I paid attention to every single step, watching the metal bow under the weight of my foot, white-knuckling the railings as I went. Finally, I reached the top and knocked on the trapdoor that had to be opened to let me in. I met the ranger who would be training me. His name was Bob, and he looked every bit how I envision a park ranger would look. Tall and thin, wiry but not scrawny, with a 5 o'clock shadow because he never had the time to shave properly. Bob was one of those guys who seemed to always have a smirk on their face like they've just been told the greatest joke of all time, but they don't want to let you in on it. He spent the entire shift showing me around and then boring me to tears with all the little details of working in a fire tower. The place wasn't bad. I was expecting an empty room with a card table and a radio, but this was nice. It reminded me of a small apartment or the inside of a small RV. There was a kitchenette with a microwave, sink, and mini-fridge. There was a couch and a couple of chairs, and most importantly, there was a bathroom. At one point, I thought there would be an outhouse at the base of the tower I would have to use. The thought of going down all those steps while holding number 1, or especially number 2, was something I didn't even want to have nightmares about. Just before the end of the shift, the next ranger came up. His name was Toby. Toby looked nothing like I envisioned rangers looking like. He was overweight but made up for it by being under tall. He had a look of mischief in his eyes like a 7th grader who had just dropped a cherry bomb down the toilet and was trying to walk away looking nonchalant. He smiled and shook my hand. "So did Bob bore you to tears?" he said. "Not quite to tears," I said. "Hey, I'm a good trainer," Bob said, looking offended, yet still wearing that grin. "Did you tell him everything?" Toby said. "Pretty sure," Bob said. "Did you tell him about?" Toby leaned closer and whispered something in Bob's ear that I couldn't hear. Bob's grin grew. "No, I didn't tell him about that." "Maybe we should wait until he's done training," Toby said. "What?" I said, looking back and forth between them. "We'll tell you once you're done job shadowing," Bob said with that infuriating grin. When we left, I was so focused on what they weren't telling me, I nearly missed the first step and plunged to my death. "Yeah, you're going to want to focus on those steps," Bob said. "We had a coworker get hurt really bad because of them." "Is he okay now?" Bob looked away. Toby came over and volunteered. He's dead. That was definitely what I wanted to hear. The next few days were a blur. Between total boredom with reading the procedure book and Bob grinning all the while, refusing to tell me the big secret, I was getting super frustrated. I couldn't wait for my first night working alone. At least I had brought some supplies up to keep in the tower. Some snacks, a few books, and a tablet to make some notes on if I started writing a story. Finally, the night came. "Did you ever read anything off of Reddit?" he said. I shrugged. I don't really read much other than books. Sign up for Reddit, then go to the No Sleep subreddit and look for a story called "I Was a Park Ranger Stationed in a Fire Tower." It had a strange set of rules. Read that. It'll tell you what to do. Okay, I said. That's the big secret. Read someone's made-up story. It might seem made up, he said, but trust me, follow the rules. I tried to read his expression to see if he was messing with me or not. In the 5 days I'd known him, there was never a time he wasn't wearing that stupid grin, until now. His face was serious as a heart attack. All right, I said. I'll look it up later on my phone. You really should do it as soon as I leave. Okay, good luck. He stepped over to the door and went down the stairs. A few minutes later, I heard his truck drive away. What the hell was that about? I stood in the middle of the room looking out at the beautiful trees, but not even seeing them. My mind was occupied by what Bob had said. It has to be a prank, I said to the empty room. Bob and Toby cooked this up to scare me on my first night. Well, I'm not falling for it. I did my first round of walking around on the outside walkway looking for any sign of fires. We worked 12-hour shifts, so I was working from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was late summer and still warm enough to go without a jacket, at least on my first round. By the time I got to my 4th round, there was a chill in the air. I started doing my rounds from the inside and made a mental note to bring a jacket with me tomorrow. It seemed odd to be talking about a jacket in late summer, but in the forest, the temperatures can vary wildly. It could be 30 degrees at night and 80 during the day. I stepped back inside and saw my phone had lit up with a text message. I looked at it and it was Bob. "Did you read the rules yet?" "No," I texted back. "You don't have much time." I knew this was a joke. It had to be a joke. The old-timer is pulling a fast one on the new guy, jerking his chain a little. "I'll get right on it," I texted. "You better." I put my phone down and looked at the clock. It was 10 minutes after 10. Outside was now completely dark, creating a very disconcerting illusion where, when I would look outside, all I saw was my reflection. I decided to turn some lights off and go with just the bare minimum. That reduced the reflection some, and I could see some trees outside. I did a slow pan around, then grabbed a bag of chips and a soda, sat down, and worked on a crossword puzzle. That only lasted a half hour until I was bored with it. I picked up a book and started to read. I woke sometime later, with my head resting on the back of the chair, chip crumbs all over my shirt, and the book laying on the floor. I stretched and looked over at the clock. It read 2:13. I jumped up, flinging the bag of chips to the floor, realizing I'd missed several checks, then ran around the room staring out at the trees. After my quick lap, I took a breath and did another slower lap to make sure there was no smoke. Thank God there was none. I chided myself for falling asleep on duty like that. As I cleaned up my mess, I decided I should set an hourly alarm on my phone, so that wouldn't happen again. When I picked up the phone, I noticed there was a series of texts from Bob. "Did you read it yet? Why aren't you answering? Are you all right? Don't open the door for any reason." The last one sent chills down my spine. Why would I open the door in the middle of the night? As I was thinking this, another text came in. "For the love of God, read it." What the hell was wrong with this guy? Was he seriously losing sleep for a stupid joke? I decided I would humor him and read the story. I opened my phone and went to the Reddit site. I had just signed up and put my information in when I heard static over the radio. I stepped to the receiver and checked it. Static blared out of it, making me jump as I heard a faint voice in it. "Tower 7. Do you read me? I heard from a voice I could barely hear through the static. I hesitated for a moment, trying to remember if this was Tower 7 or not. Tower 7, do you read me? The voice said, sounding a little more desperate. I picked up the mic and keyed it. This is Tower 7, go ahead. It's good to hear you, Tower 7, the voice said, suddenly clear. I didn't think you would answer. Well, here I am, awake and alert, answering you, I said. What did you need? I already have what I need, the voice said, sounding like it was chuckling. I'd like to come visit if that's all right. Tower 7, this is Base. Who are you talking to? I don't know. Someone on the radio, I said into the mic. 7, there's no one else on this channel, Base said. I got chills for a moment. What did that mean? How was I hearing someone that Base couldn't? Why would someone be calling now? Then it hit me that the Base dispatcher was probably in on the joke too. Okay, Base, maybe it was just some random transmission. Tower 7, the voice said. Am I all right to come from a visit? I hesitated for a moment. What if it wasn't a joke? Who the hell is walking through the forest at 2:30 in the morning? Maybe we'll do that visit another time, I said. Visit, Base said. What visit? 7. You know it's against policy to have visitors. Yeah. Sorry, Base. I won't be letting anyone visit. More static came over the radio. I could swear I could hear someone say something in the middle of it. Sounded like, we'll see. I put down the mic and picked up my phone to read the story when I saw something off in the distance. It was a light, but it was hovering like a helicopter. I switched my phone to camera mode, zoomed in, and took a picture. It was weird because the light was blue. I didn't think helicopters had blue lights on them. Also, this light wasn't flashing. It was solid the whole time. It came closer, and I took another picture. It floated even closer. It was mesmerizing. There was no sound, no hum, no whirring of tiny blades keeping it afloat like a drone. Nothing. It was about the size of a basketball and glowing the most brilliant blue I'd ever seen. I reached out for it, and it backed away from my hand. I took a step closer to the edge of the walkway, reaching out as far as my arm could stretch. It backed away a few inches, just out of reach. I stood on my tiptoes, pushing against the railing, trying to touch it. It moved away another inch. I reached the tipping point and pinwheeled my arms to regain my balance and shove back against the railing. I fell onto the walkway, landing hard on my backside and hitting the back of my head against the window. I looked up and the light was gone. I shook my head, painfully stood up, and went back inside. I didn't want to do a patrol, but figured I'd better. After a slow walk around, I collapsed in the chair and set my alarm to go off in an hour. After sitting there for a few minutes, I could feel myself nodding off. So I opened my phone and started reading the story. After about 10 minutes, I lowered my phone, eyes wide, hands shaking. It can't be real, I whispered. It's just a joke. I scrolled back through the story and reread the rules. 1. Never, under any circumstances, leave the fire tower until you are relieved. 2. Turn off all lights between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. 3. If you receive a radio transmission or phone call between those hours, do not answer. 4. If anyone knocks on the trapdoor during those hours, tell them they'll have to wait until morning. Do not open the door. 5. If you see a glowing object floating toward the tower, don't look at it. Cover your eyes and count to 50. When you open your eyes, it should be gone. If not, cover and count to 50 again. 6. If animals surround the tower, don't go down to look. Fire your flare gun into the air, twice 1 minute apart, then lock yourself in the bathroom and hope for the best. My skepticism started to waver. How could they have known about those things unless... There was a powerful banging at the trapdoor that made me jump. Who is it? I said. No one answered. A minute later, the pounding resumed. I searched for anything I could use as a weapon, digging through the silverware drawer and finding an old, dull paring knife. I backed as far away from the trapdoor as possible while staying inside. The pounding repeated. Somehow, through the fear that coursed through my veins, I found my voice. "You'll have to come back in the morning," I said. "But I'm here now, Tower," said the voice from the radio. "Let me." The last three words changed from asking to demanding. The voice also became deeper and more menacing. I didn't answer. I just slid down to the floor and hugged my knees, holding the knife in front of me, silently searching through the story on my phone to see if there was something I missed, some way I could remedy the situation. But there was nothing, and the end of the story didn't give me much hope. I covered my ears and closed my eyes as the pounding continued, now mixed with the voice that was going back and forth between pleading and threatening. It whispered, then it screamed. It sounded like a young boy, then it sounded demonic. I rocked back and forth, trying to keep some measure of sanity as the assault continued. I began to wonder how long the trapdoor would hold before whatever it was broke through. Then suddenly stopped. As happy as I was that there was no more pounding and yelling, I didn't trust it. My entire body was on pins and needles. It felt like the calm before the storm. The fire tower shook. It felt like an earthquake, only different. I stood and went out the walkway to see what was happening. When I looked down, I couldn't believe it. The tower was surrounded by animals of all kinds. Deer, squirrels, bears, moose, any forest animal you could imagine, and even a couple I couldn't and didn't want to identify. As I leaned over watching this strange menagerie, a moose rammed into one of the tower's legs. It sent a shockwave through the entire metal framework. By the time it got up to me, the tower was shaking so hard it made me lose my balance. I toppled over the edge and fell. I threw my arm out, attempting to catch the rail, but only touched it with my fingertips. I knew I was falling to my death. There was no doubt. The wind rushing in my ears didn't drown out the sound of my screaming. It sounded odd, like I was listening to someone else scream. I closed my eyes, not wanting to know when the end was coming. Suddenly, something hit me hard in the ribs. I looked and I had hit a tree limb, but it didn't stop me. The branch broke, sending me falling again until I hit another branch. This one tore a gash on my leg as I flipped head over heels and fell again. The next branch grazed my head and made me see stars. I bounced off another branch, hitting my shoulder, then took one to the knee and landed flat on my back on the ground. I lay there dazed, injured but alive and surprised to be so. As I tried to regain my bearings, I saw the animals rushing over to me. I doubted they wanted me to pet them while they licked my wounds and cared for me while singing Disney song. I jumped up as pain rocked my body from more places than I wanted to think about. I hopped over to the tower steps and began my long, arduous journey, just a half step away from a bunch of animals that seemed dead set on my destruction. About halfway up, I realized there was no more pursuit, so I slowed, trying to conserve energy. I got to the top, unlocked the hatch, and tried to push it open. It took several tries to get enough strength while balancing on one leg, standing on the tiniest of all the tiny steps. As soon as I got it open, I turned and slammed it shut, locking it. I hobbled into the room, found the first aid box, and struggled to get to the couch. I wanted nothing more than to curl up in a ball and forget this day ever happened. I tried to easily lay myself down, but ended up collapsing in an excruciating heap. Once down, I focused on bandaging the leg since it was losing the most blood. Once done, I proceeded to bandage all the rest of the areas that needed. "How are you feeling, Tower 7? I heard the voice say over the radio. I didn't answer. "Oh, come on now, Tower. Don't be like that," it said. "Talk to me. Let me in and we'll have a conversation." I lay there trying to think of anything other than pain and this voice. There has to be punishment for disobeying the rules. My blood ran cold. How did that thing know about the rules? I reached into my pocket and was astonished that my phone was there. It had a cracked screen but was usable. I texted Bob. "I'm alive somehow." I broke half the rules without knowing it because I read the story too late. "Are you all right?" I took pictures of my bandaged leg that was wrapped, but blood was still seeping through. I took pictures of my battered face and my bruised ribs. I sent them all to Bob. Good Lord, man, what did you do? I fell out of the tower. You did what? Was leaning over the edge of the walkway when one of the animals smashed into the support leg and shook the tower, knocking me over. How are you alive? Tree caught me. I'll call the paramedics and come in early to relieve you. I'll be laying here on the couch, bleeding. Then I added, I'll follow the rules from now on. There was static on the radio and a faint voice said, You'd better. When Bob unlocked the hatch and led the EMTs in, he didn't have that grin on his face. You okay, kid? He said. Hunky-dory, how about you? I said, laying on cushions that were soaked in my own blood. He might be in shock, one of the EMTs said. My rescue was an adventure in itself. When they examined me, they informed me that my leg was broken. I was sweating, trying to go back down those steps with a splint on. I could just see me slipping near the top and falling again. There didn't seem to be any trees close enough to catch me on this side. Apparently, the EMT seemed to be thinking the same thing. Someone came up with the brilliant idea of tying me to a backboard and trying to carry me down the steps. After 2 EMTs nearly fell, they decided to tie to a rope and lower me like a sack of potatoes. They rigged up a rope around one of the support poles for the walkway. Watching the rope scrape along the edges of the wood, fraying as it went, was probably more terrifying than anything I'd experienced last night. Floating in the air, spinning slowly didn't help my fear of heights any. I decided to close my eyes and try to stay as still as possible, so the balance wouldn't be disturbed and slide me out of the end to fall to my death. I was extremely grateful when the board hit the ground. My adrenaline finally crashed, and I fell into a deep sleep as they loaded me into the ambulance. Truth be told, I'm absolutely terrified to go back to the tower. It's not like I have a lot of choices. Park ranger is a good-paying job, and sitting around watching for fires is about the easiest job I've ever heard of. If you take away the supernatural voices, bizarre wildlife, strange lights, and the stares of death, I'm hoping paying attention to the rule will keep me safe. I'm posting this as a warning. If your job has some strange rules, make sure you follow them, no matter how stupid you think they might be. How do you like this story? Write in the comments your opinion of what happened. Thank you for listening. Please use the subscribe button to hear new creepy stories every night.